Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Brokos. You may know me as the author of the Thinking Poker blog, as one of the hosts of the Thinking Poker podcast, as a video producer at Tournament Poker Edge and Red Chip Poker. What you are about to see is a completely free strategy video with myself and the always great and entertaining Jamie Kerstetter, whom you may know from Twitch or from perhaps playing live poker with her in New Jersey. So Jamie and I are going to be reviewing some hands that she played on an online New Jersey site, and we're also going to be just kind of talking some general wisdom about poker and tournament poker. And as I said, Jamie is always entertaining. If you're not familiar with her, she's really just a delight to talk to. So I think you'll enjoy this, and I think there's a lot of valuable content in here as well. This video is produced as part of a fundraising campaign that I did for a nonprofit organization that I work with called the Bay Area Urban Debate League. This was a year-end fundraising campaign, so the campaign itself is over, but my hope is that if you enjoy this video, you'll consider making a donation to the organization. So after you watch the video, you can go to baudl.org, click on the donate button, and just give whatever you think the video was worth, and I certainly would appreciate it. Other than that, there's no cost to the video, and I hope you will enjoy it. Thank you, Jamie, for your help with this.
Oh, no problem.
So what are these? Are these hands all from the same tournament?
Yeah, these are I picked 4 or 5 hands from late stages of a $100 rebuy, 10K guarantee on Borgata Poker. So this is just New Jersey players.
Nice. And what are those fields like? I mean, I've never played on any of the New Jersey specific sites. How would you? I don't know. Maybe you don't have much of a point of reference to other like online poker, but
I've played a ton. Like I moved to Mexico for a little while. I was playing internationally, and then I've played some of the illegal sites. I prefer this. I think a couple hands I'm going to show you might serve as like an advertisement for people to want to move to New Jersey. But yeah, it's kind of weird. Like the fields are very small. I play versus the same players often, but we get a lot of people. The schedule starts at 7 p.m. most nights, so we get a lot of people who come home from work and just throw $100 into a tournament. We get a lot more rec players than I think the average site would get.
Nice.
So, yeah.
And I mean, how much do you like running into the same people? I mean, I guess in some sense you'd rather have randoms if they're like the same people are good people. But I mean, do you enjoy having a database on people?
I think it's interesting. It's kind of cool because you have a lot of history with people, so you can really level sometimes. I level myself a lot, thinking that someone's like capable of stuff that's not. But it does make it a little more interesting. I think it probably feels similar to how like some of the high rollers probably play, like playing so many hands against each other. Balancing your range starts to be like super important, and just making sure that you don't have like sizing tells and stuff, because you really are playing like tons of hands versus the same people.
Mm. All right, you want to get us started on this first one?
Sure. This one's it's nothing too exciting, this hand. I just wanted to make 1 point. This is like towards the end. I think we're on the final table bubble right now. I just wanted to make a sizing point here. So I'm in raise. It gets defended, and the flop comes out pretty good for our range. I think that he would have shoved like any pair with that stack size.
Right.
He would have shoved any aces that are better than mine.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the kind of board where like I've been used to c-betting probably somewhere like 40 to 60% all the time. And I think I made a 2 big blind c-bet, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. And he folds. Been playing around with c-bet sizing a lot, and I think like this could have been one where I even c-bet like 6,200 or something. It's like he has it or he doesn't, and you're so unlikely to get bluffed at in this spot on the final table bubble when he's one of like the middling stacks. He's like a short-ish stack, but he just has to fade this one guy who's 30K, and there's another guy at the other table that had like maybe 8 big blinds or something.
So you'd be looking to bet fold 6,000.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Thinking that like, unless this person is like super spewy and he's just not, he was just a like decent reg. I just don't think you get played back at. Like you may get floated more if you size really small. But I just don't. I think people tend to like become pretty straightforward when they're on the final table bubble, you just don't have to worry about like fancy plays that much.
Yeah, I think so I guess the reason I was surprised about that, I think what you said about the sizing is dead on. I think this is a really good spot to have small sizing, and I think for the sizing part, the final table bubble is not even that. Like, this is sort of how I would size this in a lot of situations, just because I think you have such a strong range advantage cutoff versus big blind here. Like you said, especially given that you're assuming he's like jamming pairs and stuff pre-flop. You have a much stronger range than he does on this flop because you still have all the like aces and ace king and that kind of stuff in your range, and it's a flop where you have very few hands that really want to check behind. Even when you have a hand like ace 10 that is very likely to be the best hand, you still don't really want to check back. So I think like you're going to be betting at a really high frequency and even betting a small amount. When he's holding a hand like I don't know, queen 7 suited. Just like what can he do about that? Even if he's facing a bet of 6,000, there's still like not that much he can do. And the only thing I'm thinking is in a non-final table bubble situation, ace 10 is pretty high up in your range to fold to like a tiny check raise, and that is part of what'll start to happen. When you bet smaller, people will do stuff like float or make little check raises, which is fine. Like if you have ace 10, at some point it just becomes a value bet. Like if you bet 6,000, like he either has to fold so much that it doesn't really matter like what he calls with because he's folding so frequently you just like print money with the bet, or he has to start calling with hands worse than ace 10. Like he very rarely has a better hand than ace 10.
Right. And I feel like we're kind of protected by his short stack. Like you can't, like no matter what his plans are for the hand, he could run out of chips.
Right.
Like I'll float here and then I'll check raise a turn. It's like he's kind of like handcuffed a little bit and kind of has to like take his stand now or just fold and like live to see the next hand.
Yeah.
Plus people are getting so like everyone realizes that like you need to be defending your big blind more to min raises. So it just doesn't mean that much anymore. Like it can really be like he could have like 60% of hands. Like his defend range might be like 60% or something here. So it's like he doesn't even get stubborn. Like I feel like the more someone defends their big blind, the less stubborn they get over it. When it's like just a standard play, it's like, okay, well I have 6-7 suited, I'm gonna defend my big blind. Then you don't get those like stubborn people who are like, now I need to find a way to win. They're just like, oh well, I lost one big blind.
Right.
It's not a big deal.
And that's the big part of the reason of using that small sizing is just that they have incentive to see the flop with so many bad hands, and when you even with a hand as strong as this one, you still have incentive in getting them off of the 6-7 of diamonds or whatever, because there's so many ways for them to either draw out on you on the turn or just put pressure on you on the turn.
And then check raise me all in or something. Yeah, there's like rather just end the hand right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this has been. I did mention before my Hold'em manager is doing weird things, like replaying the tournament backwards. I was like, this is the next hand I want to talk about. And, like, I had originally tagged this because I was like, like, in the moment, I was upset at myself for opening to 2 short stacks when I just, like, really didn't have to. Like, this is right when our final table combined down to 9. Mm. And in the moment, I was, like, kicking myself. Like, I was just raising, and then I see that. I'll just show you the hand first. That would make more sense. So I ended up deciding to open, knowing that I'd have to commit, that I'm committing to the small blind stack. Results aside, if I'd won the hand, I still would have been like, darn, like, just giving away chips is kind of annoying. There was a lot... No, pause. Come on. Yeah, see what I mean? Like, now I'm back to, like, 100 hands before. Hang on one second.
There you go.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, so I open here knowing I'm committing to Joey one-way shove. I call, I have enough equity in the hand, it's fine. I think I'm actually doing fine against his range. He's so short and he's in the small blind with the big blind folding and with the antes. I'm okay with this call. The only problem with it is like when I start to think a little bit more about like ICM implications here, I was chip leading at this point. There are Joey one-way at 23K, Hyperion 77K, we got Spartacus 56K. There are so many like very short stacks that I kind of just want to like maintain my chip lead right now, and like these guys have to think so much about like outlasting each other ICM wise that like I don't want to double up short stacks. I just want to like let them hang around and let me leverage my chip lead over the rest of the table. So I was like a little bit annoyed at the fact that I doubled up the shortest stack in this spot. I was wondering what you thought about that.
Yeah, I see. I actually kind of think that everything you said is maybe an argument for being okay with doubling up this guy. I think I'd be more concerned about doubling up like a medium, like doubling up one of the 80K stacks. Not that you're like looking to double that guy, but him going up to 50K is still. I mean, there's still a lot of pressure on like the 80K stacks with him sitting there. To some extent, I mean, it even sort of prolongs the. I mean, this is more of like a sit and go concept, but I remember like being the chip leader on the four-handed sit and go bubble or whatever. Like sometimes you actually had an interest in like giving a walk to the shortest stack in the big blind so you could like keep pillaging blind. I mean, I'm just kind of like remembering some stuff like that, but yeah, it seems like a fine open to me. I mean, how many hands can the small blind really decide to go with? Like maybe 15%. Right. I mean, he's going to be folding a really high frequency.
Looking at like the straight equities and stuff, and like and like how I'm going to be doing it's his range. I like the fact that I have a queen in my hand instead of a king. I'm probably going to be live against the hands that he is shoving, comfortable shoving with no fold equity basically against me. I think that's fine. I don't know, like letting a 6 big blind stack hang around like kind of handcuffs everyone else at the table. If they're thinking about ICM, it's not like this is a 10K buy-in with like 40 and 50K pay jumps. Like it's not that, but I don't know. It's like there's always the argument for like you should always care about it. ICM though, it's like if you're buying into a $100 tournament and there's $100 pay jumps, they should be significant to you.
Right.
They're not $10,000, $20,000 pay jumps.
But yeah, I'm certainly not saying you should avoid it or ignore it. I just it seems like he wakes up with a hand infrequently enough, and I don't know that doubling him up is that terrible for you. I mean, I'm not the most ICM aware person in the world, but
as becoming more aware, I'm like, oh my god, you could just never click call. Anytime I've done commentary for final tables, I feel like I've been like, oh, well, this is a clear call. This is a clear call. I'm like, I wonder how many times I've just like brushed off a call as like obviously it's a call when like it's an ICM disaster.
You're making me worry now.
Yeah, it is incredible though. Like people will post hands when it's like I feel like I discussed one with you guys before. Like it was a while ago, like a year ago, where we were like, oh my god, how can ace queen be a fold? And like we're making arguments for it being a fold. Do you remember this?
Yeah, that does sound kind of familiar.
But like I feel like we plugged in the numbers wrong or something because it was ridiculous. It was like, wait, so you could like only call with ace ace? It was one of those. But I mean, that sounds ridiculous, and I'm clearly exaggerating. But there have been spots where like a button will shove like 12 big blinds, and you have ace queen in the big blind, and it's a fold based on like the short stacks of the table. And I'm like, oh my god, like these are spots where in a $500 buy-in when you've survived 2,000 people and first is like 200K, I would just be snap calling and being like, of course it's a call. And I'm looking now and I'm like, no, like I need to be thinking way harder about calling off my stack in these spots.
Wow.
So, okay. What was the next hand? 50. Okay, this one's fun. This is my advertisement for moving to New Jersey for anyone listening. Should be over here, 50-ish. Yeah. I'll just let the hand play out, and then we could talk about... I'm not really super involved in this hand, but as I was watching it happen, I was, like, predicting what these people would have, and I'm like, where am I? So I just defend the threes after an undergun open and a flat, basically for just set mining value.
Mm-hmm.
Checks through the flop. This guy leads the turn. He gets called in the river. He checks, induces a bluff, I guess, from sixes, and calls.
Wow.
So this is just, like, not real, right? This isn't even New Jersey. This is, like, not even planet Earth.
Yeah, that's just a disaster of a hand on both of their parts. Like, I think I hate almost every single one of their decisions except for checking the flop.
Mm-hmm.
And the pre-flop, I guess. But
HUD with these guys, I have over 1,000 hands on the guy with sixes, and I have 800 something hands on the guy with sevens. So these people play a decent amount. So I thought it was kind of interesting because it just made me think about what kind of hands I would be opening in Joey's spot, and like I clearly would open sevens, but I was thinking about him, like I think in this spot I would probably sevens might be the worst hand that I open, maybe sixes. If you look at his numbers and like the remaining players at the table, he's running 18-12, so like his under the gun open should probably hold some weight. I'm not looking at him as someone who's like messing around and opening really wide. So then if you think about that, if these people are running HUDs and they jam on him, he's committed versus Spartacus and versus the guy who had sixes. And so he really shouldn't be opening like fives minus anymore because he would be doing really badly against the range that they would happily shove, and he'd have to call off. So knowing this, it's like super funny. I was just trying to figure out what the guy with sixes was thinking, and I'm like, is he thinking that? Like, is he like, all right, this guy can't be opening super tight. I have a hand that is like puke inducing. Like, you have 11 and a half big blinds and you get dealt this hand and you're like, oh sweet, like I got a pair. And then under the gun opens and all of a sudden I would look at it and be like, all right, I'm folding this hand.
Right. Yeah, I don't think he should be even thinking about getting involved with the under the gun raise.
Right, but it's like a spot where I've seen people make this mistake a lot, especially live, where they're like, I have a hand that seems too good to fold, and it seems not good enough to shove. So they make the worst decision possible, which is to flat. And all of a sudden you're like set mining with a hand that like, you may not even see the flop if one of the blinds decides to attack this spot. And when you do see a flop, you're just not doing well unless you actually hit a set. So he decides to do the worst thing and just call and like hope for the best, I guess.
That's the thing, and like his turn call is so inconsistent with his river shove, where it's like, if you're calling the turn, it should be because you think you're good, not because you're gonna like turn your hand into a bluff on the river.
Exactly. I was like, on the river, and he didn't even commit that much. Like, if you think of how short he was to start the hand, I'm like, all right, so he lost half his stack by doing a stupid thing. Like, I would be thrilled to get to live to see another day in that spot. To be like, unless you think you're gonna get like nines to fold, there's just no hand that Joey's folding in this spot. Like, I don't know, unless you're beating it.
Yeah, I'm actually starting to think Joey's river call might not be such a disaster, just because I think that, you know, RJSK is probably jamming. Like, so when Joey bets the turn and RJ just calls, I guess it doesn't seem so likely. I mean, he really shouldn't have a hand like the one that he does, or even like a queen or a 10. I feel like a lot of people just like are either going to shove if they think they're ahead or fold if they don't. And the only time they're calling is when they have a hand that's like they're trying to improve on the river. So maybe like King Jack is a hand that would like call the turn, and then
Jack would definitely put in the range, but I'd also put like lots of 10s in his range where he's just like, oh well, I have a bluff catcher. Like, I'm going to just continue bluff catching through this hand.
For RJ?
10 suited, ace 10, things like that. But those all, like ace 10 suiteds, you'd think would just jam it pre or fold.
Are you talking about RJ?
Yeah.
Yeah, or not jam the river. Like,
right.
I guess I don't see, like, so I don't really see people jamming the river very thin for value. Like, I don't see them getting to the river with that many hands that they would then decide to value bet that they wouldn't just raise the turn on. So, like, you know, if he has like a 10, I would sort of expect that he wouldn't try to value bet the river with that.
Just check back and be like, happy
right.
Okay.
And like with a queen, he's probably either betting the flop or jamming the turn. So it's sort of like either he improved, he had an 8 and he made trips, like that makes sense, or he missed something. I guess there's not really a whole lot for him to miss either, though.
Right. This is a spot where when I had 3s there, I was like super thrilled to be able to set mine versus 2 players, because one, Joey had a lot of chips. I was like, this is a good spot for me regardless of if RJSK called. But when he called, I was like, this guy is trapping, right?
Yeah,
like,
he ought to be pretty bladed there.
To have big blinds that he was not trapping in that spot. So like, and especially when it checked back, I'm like, okay, does this guy really have like top set right now? That would be weird. Like, I expect players on that short of a stack when they're trapping to be super nutted. Like, I don't even think queens. I think aces and kings.
Right.
I think queens just jams it pre, knowing that the under the gun raiser is going to have a lot of equity against them. So they just want to get it in. And yeah, it was kind of interesting. Like, so that hand, so if anyone was thinking about like taking a couple month vacation in Jersey, this hand should probably solidify that. We've lovely tundra weather right now.
And is that all I need to do to play in Jersey? I just have to be there. I don't have to, like, it's not like Poker Stars where I have to relocate to Canada or show the release and everything.
It takes like 5 minutes to deposit on the site. You could go to Borgata with cash, create your account in 5 minutes, put the money on, win a tournament that day, go to the cage, take 10K and leave.
That sounds like a plan.
It's pretty nice, yeah. So here's another one that wasn't, like, I'm finding more hands that are like, nothing really happened for me, but it's like an interesting-ish spot. Just like little choices that I used to make that I think were like marginally bad, starting to make slightly better decisions, I think. So under the gun raises, we're now 7-handed, and I end up just folding in this spot.
Yeah, I think it's kind of similar to what we were just saying about the pocket sixes, where it's like, okay, you have a decent looking hand, but it doesn't perform that well against an under the gun opening range. You're going to be out of position. You're not getting an amazing price. Like, what's the best case scenario here? I mean, I guess the best case scenario is you spike the like 10 jack ace, but
Yeah.
realistically, it's like even if you get a king or a queen high flop, you're not really dominating. Like he probably doesn't have a lot of dominated kings or queens in his range, so you're still just sort of bluff catching with. I mean, it'll be a profitable bluff catch, but it's not like you just draw into a bluff catcher basically.
Right. It's a spot where like I'm gonna have trouble ever taking control of the hand. So like I don't get to dictate when the pocket's big in the spot at all. I'm gonna be out of position. I have a bluff catcher from the start basically. And if this guy has a hand like he should have, which is like either dominating me or he has like jacks 10, something like that, where if it comes out king or queen high, like I can't build a big pot and win it. So it's like,
yeah, I mean you maybe squeeze a single bet out of jacks on like a queen 9-5. You check on the flop and you bet the turn, and then he folds to a river bet or something like that.
Yep. And I just think this guy is not he's a reg, but he's a little too loose and a little too passive. I tend to like to get into pots with him, but in this spot I was like, he's opening 23 big blind stack with a 7 big blind stack hanging around at a final table. I'm like, he should really have a decent hand. I shouldn't be doing well against his hand. Like I don't expect him to turn up with like queen jack here. So just like, I don't know, it's just like little decisions like this where you don't just like autopilot go, oh, I have 2 big cards, like let's see some flops here. Like at final tables you have to be just so much more selective about where you commit chips. And also like this is the kind of hand where I'm like, I like to just 3-bet it or fold, and like if I 3-bet it I'm committing to his stack, and that's just such a disaster. So
yeah, I mean I wouldn't even say this is like final table specific. I mean just looking at these stack sizes, I don't ever really see a situation, I mean unless the under the gun is like a real psychopath where if he's got like a 30% under the gun open, okay, sure, but basically you need him like good implied odds on a king or a queen high flop. Because it's going to be, or you need to be able to continue on a lot of flops that are not king or queen high. I mean, so if like this player has some really exploitable tendency where he, raises too much under the gun and c-bets too much and gives up too much to check raises where maybe your cards don't even matter, and then, sure, king queen is fine. But for the most part, it's like, you can really only play king X, queen X, and jack 10X, and you need to be able to play those flops pretty profitably, considering that, that's only about a third of flops. So if you're just, you're going to be spotting him 7,500 chips on 2/3 of flops, you need to be making up for that on the flops that you connect with. And I don't see you having implied odds that are that great on those boards.
Right.
And the bigger thing is like, with these stack sizes, I think even king queen suited, like the suitedness just doesn't change that much. Where I probably still correct to fold that.
Yeah, it just hurts more to fold that.
Right. But that's the thing. It's just like you're saying, it's just like just because a hand is pretty doesn't mean it's a good idea to. And you see this a lot in live poker too, where people just like, if they have 2 Broadway cards or whatever, they just like want to see a flop with it, and they're really not paying much attention to stack sizes or positions or anything like that. They're just like, oh, I have to see a flop by base 10, and then we'll go from there. And like going from there is, you need to think about what that looks like.
Mm-hmm. And I think on Jersey sites, especially, like it's closer to live poker than like Stars International is at this point, because we get a lot of overlap. Like there are a lot of live players who just like will play 1 or 2 tournaments after work on these sites and stuff. So it's like you do get someone who's like one tabling. I don't have that feeling of like impatience that you get with live poker. The feeling when you're sitting there and you're only seeing like 25 or 30 hands an hour, and you see king queen suited in this spot, and you're like, all right, am I really going to fold this and like fold another orbit before I see a hand as nice? Like it'll get in your head. Like I'll be disciplined because I'm doing this for a living and I have to. But if I was someone playing for fun, I'm seeing a flop. Are you kidding me? So and I'm thinking that happens with players online too, because they're just not multi-tabling. They're not like worrying about their hourly or like how many tables they could stack and like all this stuff. So like they might still be only seeing like one hand every 40 seconds or whatever it is. So like they're also feeling the impatience that you feel from like one tabling. Mm-hmm. So I think especially like it probably came up with that sixes hand earlier, that like, he's just waiting for a spot and he's feeling impatient. Like those are like live poker feelings where you're like, oh no, I'm not going to see another hand for a while. I'm like, you'll see a hand in 5 seconds, just fold, I promise. So yeah, so like this hand's not super exciting, but it's just like little things like this pass by, like especially when I'm talking to new players. I always like to be talking about these like big pots I played or like big mistakes they're making or like hands that they'll send me hands that they know are bad or they know are good.
Mm.
And it's usually like big pots they won or lost or like big mistakes. But I'm like, these little spots where you're just passing up on a spot that might look enticing when you're a new player. Um, it's just like little spots like this that save you 7,500 chips or save you from making a bad call that has even worse reverse implied odds later, that can make you like $1,000 more in this tournament if you just fold it.
Yeah, and this stuff comes up so often. Like, having your pre-flop discipline is so much more important than having the right river check raising range.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
Exactly.
you
Like
have
how
way
often
more
are you?
opportunities to exercise it.
Yeah, you're making like pre-flop, even like marginal pre-flop decisions are important because you're making, 10 times or like, I don't know, whatever it is, like 6 times more pre-flop decisions than you are making like flop, turn, and river decisions.
Yeah, I mean, in
So,
a tournament, it's probably more than 10 times because like it's so rare that you even like play rivers in tournaments.
right, especially deep in tournaments, like,
Yeah.
I'm not, unless you're like chip leader versus chip leader, you're not making a lot of river decisions at all. All right. And then we're going way faster than I thought. I should have probably banked some more hands, but
I'm trying to drag it out as well as I can.
I talk really fast too. Sorry. This is just kind of a size spot where the only point I wanted to make about it is that like my opening range is so tight here, and I'm forced to call off and just lose. Um, but I was going to make a point about this. I've made some mistakes when I've been going through hands with people who are better than me. Is like I do tighten up like way too much. Deep in the tournament, like 2 tables down. And this is one spot that where I'm like playing tight just pays off so much. This is probably like the bottom of my range for opening here because I have to call up versus this guy, and then basically I'm switching spots with him, and I'm now the short stack that has no fold equity versus anyone really. I have like an 11 big blind stack. I have no fold equity over raises, is what I'm meaning. So like I've drastically changed my stance in the tournament.
Mm.
By basically having to call off in this spot. So I'm opening ace-8 suited, I'm opening like king-queen, hands like that. I'm opening like pairs over sixes probably, but that might be it. And I was wondering what you thought of that. Am I being way too tight? Or am I better off preserving my stack and waiting out this guy and basically just like being a little more selective with the spots I'm taking?
Yeah, you're embarrassing me here because this is really not the this is just where my sort of I mean, I don't play that many tournaments, and I in particular don't think a lot about like the tournaments that I do play are not frequently ones where I'm making like the final 2 tables of the tournament, and to be honest, it's not something I've thought through that exact question of like
That's probably why you're like a happy person. That you're not like spending time playing MTTs. Uh, these spots kind of come up a lot, and like I'm okay. Like basically, I'm not doing poorly against the 8 or 9 big blind shove range. Like he is the low man on the totem pole. He can't really like be super selective about spots he's taking, but I do expect him to show up with a good hand when he's shoving with no fold equity against me. I'm not sure about this exact spot. This is a spot where like I don't really know how to assess this ICM wise if I'm like, because it's not like I'm calling off my stack, but I'm putting myself in like such a worse position in the tournament when I lose this hand.
mm,
And I'm not like drastically improving my chance in the tournament when I win the hand because he's shorter. I would have like 230-ish, 240K. And I just don't know. I don't know, like, I think ace-8 suited is a must raise, must go with type of hand, but I'm wondering, like, how much looser I should really be opening here.
yeah. I mean, the only other one that kind of comes to mind is like ace-5 suited may perform actually. I mean, so the presence of like sixes and sevens in his shoving range probably makes this not true, but the stronger his shoving range is, the more it starts to be the case that ace-5 suited might actually perform better than certainly than ace-6 suited. But I mean that's sort of a minor point. I mean, I do think in general like the suited aces are. I'm pretty reluctant to open fold a suited ace. I mean, they are really good stealing hands, and I guess that it's just sort of like this very specific situation of given that you're pricing yourself in against this player, and like given the stack sizes at final 2 tables, is even that worth doing? I mean, I guess it reminds me a little bit of the queen 4 suited hand, where it's like, yeah, it really sucks when this happens, but it's not that easy for him to wake up with a hand like this. You know, he's
And
probably
if I'm
only.
passing up on these opportunities, like, am I just blinding myself down trying to make like a $300 pay jump when first is like 3K? It's like that's kind of stupid.
Yeah.
Spending up that much. Yeah. And then I just met my demise in a very standard spot like 2 seconds later. So that's what makes you like. It's very easy to say don't be results oriented, and then I watch the hand. I'm like, damn. You know, I double up here. Do I even care that like the ace-8 suited hand happens? Like there are still like fish tendencies psychologically that I have to like, get rid of. But I think it's kind of cute to play poker for a long time and still super care. And they're showing us hands from before because it's going backwards. So
Yeah, I mean, and you know, because we were talking about like being happier not playing tournaments. Have you read much Tommy Angelo? Have you read Elements of Poker?
I on Run It Once I was listening to his. I like him a lot. Just like I think he seems like a super chill person that like survived poker. You know,
Yeah.
like a lot of people get super bitter and stuff, and he like took the complete opposite way. But I haven't
Yeah,
like
poker
read,
like made him less bitter.
yeah,
Or, I mean, poker led him to stuff that made him less bitter.
yeah. It's funny how some people can just escape the like certain mindsets that like drive me crazy. Like I'll feel myself start to get like jealous of someone doing really well, and I have to be like, "Yo, stop being a jerk." You know, you have to like snap yourself out of it. And also other things like beating yourself up for results-oriented things, or like for making mistakes that like are just naturally going to happen because you're not perfect and you need to like learn from people better than you and stuff like that. Like I still will beat myself up. Like I'm like, how do I expect to be super awesome at everything when like I need to put in way more work and like talk to way better players. But I'll still like, I don't know. It's been how many years? I think I've been playing professionally for 5 years, fully like full time, and I still like feel these like fish tendencies creep into my head where I'm like, yeah, I still get that like the psychological problems that get involved with like a downswing or something.
Yeah, I mean, so the specific Tommy Angelo quote I was going to mention is, you know, he says something about like, you know, the reason he stopped playing tournaments is that the kind of pain to pleasure ratio was way out of whack. Where and you know I certainly feel this where, you know, like, you know, for me, like losing a few $1,000s in a cash game is sort of a shrug, like, you know, that happens, variance, and like busting a $500 tournament is like infuriating. And or not, I mean, not infuriating, but like it really does hurt a lot more to go out of a tournament, which in some ways makes it more fun too, because it's sort of like the thrill. But I do start to wonder, you know, the reasons that I find like deep stacked cash games interesting and entertaining and enjoyable is, I think, similar to why people do like crossword puzzles or something. Or I used to do logic puzzles for fun. You know, you can buy like, or you used to be able to buy books of them. Like you can buy books of crossword puzzles, like the kind of stuff you probably would have seen on the LSAT. Like I just did that for fun, and so like
Logic games part too.
what's that?
The LSAT, that was my favorite part of it. Like people would complain about the logic games. I'm like, I spent like 5 times more time on the logic game
Right.
than anything else.
But so that's like, I feel like with deep stack poker, the enjoyment that I'm getting from it is like stimulating a part of my brain in like a healthy way that's sort of leading me to like my brain to function better in some way or something. Whereas with tournaments, I feel like I do enjoy tournaments, but the thing that I enjoy about them is what I'll often say is like there's really no feeling like getting deep in a tournament, and that's more like a gambling sort of enjoyment where you're just kind of like playing for the opportunity to have like a rush associated with, you know, potentially having a big score, having some exciting thing happen. It's not that I find, and it's not that tournament situations can't be interesting, and some people might really enjoy analyzing them, but just for me, I don't find tournament situations like fascinating in the same way I do deeper stacked situations. And a lot of my enjoyment is I feel like it was more, not was, I still play them, but it's more just like chasing the rush.
Yeah. I think your decisions are so much more simple. Like that, obviously, because you're just so much more shallow a lot of times. And even when you're deep, like the people you're playing hands against are shallow, and their backs against the wall. So it's like they don't have many choices. Whereas like in cash, you could be like 500 big blinds deep, and like every street has like 10 different options based on like bet sizing alone. You have just endless options, and like trying to induce something out of your opponent and things like that. Where as like in tournaments, when you're like 20 big blinds deep, you're like, what can you really do? Like the only things that I still it is kind of what you're saying, like the rush of gambling, but it's like the rush of risk taking that I've gotten a little bit better at. Like that still feels good when I'll like take a spot based on like a live read that makes me want to puke. Um, that still is fun deep in a tournament. But yeah, like what you're saying makes so much sense. And like I have considered, 'cause for like about a year, I was just playing live cash when I was like trying to build up a roll, and it was fun, and it was like kind of like felt like work rather than felt like gambling or playing. Like I was just, all right, if I go here and play this many hours, I'm gonna make this many dollars per hour over this time. You know, like I had kind of there was obviously a way lower ceiling to how much I could make that year, but it also did feel good to like be grinding. Whereas I don't feel like
and
that
you're
right
not
now.
going to lose money that year.
Yeah, exactly. It just does feel weird too, though, to be like a casino reg where like I'll go to a casino and like everyone says hi to me, and a guy next to me will be like, "What are you, like the mayor here?" And I'm like, "Oh God, I'm fucking way too much."
The other thing that you said that I wanted to mention was about like accepting that you're going to make mistakes, and I think there's a lot of people who are, so like the fishiest thing is to sort of get upset about bad beats or whatever, and to be like, oh, I'm mad that I had kings and ran into aces, or I'm mad that I had kings and lost ace king or whatever. And that I think like a lot of more serious poker players can pretty easily recognize as kind of an irrational, like that was the thing that was beyond your control. Don't worry about it. Don't get upset about it. Like I think that's pretty well accepted. But I think that you kind of like you're saying, it's not reasonable to assume that you're never going to make a mistake either. So I think a lot of people have this idea of I don't get tilted about bad beats. I get tilted when I make mistakes, and so they have the idea that making mistakes is something that's like within their control. And I mean, you do want to learn from your mistakes, and you don't want to get sloppy in terms of like encouraging yourself to make more mistakes. But it is, for one thing, like no one's a perfect poker player, and most people aren't even like excellent poker players. And then beyond that, it's just like you can't, I don't know, like you're not always going to be at your very sharpest, or I mean, I don't think it is within your control to like avoid all mistakes. And I haven't fully figured out how to reconcile that, but I do. I don't think people should just like give themselves permission to beat themselves up over mistakes and to say like, well, it was in my control and I messed it up, so that's a reasonable thing to be upset about.
Plus, sometimes you need to overcorrect before you realize, like before you get to the right point. Like I used to be way too tight, and like I would. It's really hard to like discover that you're way too tight because you don't have this like huge blow up hand that teaches you you're too tight. You just kind of are like, wow, like I'm not building stacks. Like I'm squeaking into the money, or I'm like limping into the final table with my 12 bigs or something like that. So like you just keep compiling evidence supporting the fact that perhaps I play too tight, right? So now like I am even easier on myself if I have a huge blow up, but like I had a reasonable expectation for the hand to work, for the bluff to work, or whatever, like a good 4-bet jam spot with like very little fold equity, but I'm going with my read, or like with the HUD stats that this guy's 3-betting way too much, blah, blah, blah. Like those things, like if I have a huge blow up and lose, like I'm kind of proud of it at this point because I feel like there are spots I'm missing that I should be taking. And like getting a bluff picked off just doesn't hurt that bad when that's like something I want to work on anyways, to like make sure that I'm staying aggressive throughout the tournament and not like shutting down when I feel the end is coming close, So things like that, like certain mistakes are just like a reflection of growth too, and you like shouldn't feel bad about them.
Yeah, and a willingness to make mistakes. Like if you kind of come in with the idea of the most important thing to me is like not making any mistakes. I mean, you can do that, but there's going to be, I guess depending on how you phrase mistakes, but like if you end up not making a bluff that would have worked, like that's a mistake. And I think a lot of people don't see that as a mistake. They're just like, if they bluff and it doesn't work, then they're like, oh, that was a mistake. But
right.
Like missing one
on every bluff opportunity is a way bigger mistake than making one bad bluff, because you make one bad bluff, sometimes it works.
Yeah, and like sometimes I do stuff, and this is why I like to play at stakes that I'm like really comfortable at, and part of again why I sort of prefer cash to tournaments is like it like a cash game at my regular stake, a game that I know I can play in all the time. Like I mean, I do a lot of stuff that I really don't know if it's gonna work, and I think like big like a 300 big blind bluff or something that starts with like check raise over betting the flop and then just like bomb turn shove river, and I'm like maybe this will work. Like let's just see, like we'll run a 300 big blind experiment, and just like being willing, like being okay with doing stuff like that. even if it does turn out to be a mistake, like you said, I mean, it is sort of how you get better, and it's way harder to convince yourself to do stuff like that when you're deep in a tournament, because like it's, you know, you're gonna feel like shit if it.
Yes, and you've spent like I mean, a lot of the tournaments I'm playing these days are great tournaments, and you're 3 days into it before you take that spot.
Right.
The dare to be great, blaze of glory, want to kill yourself spot. You know, like that's how you feel. It's just like, okay, I think I can do it. You take the spot, and then you leave the casino being like, I just spent 3 days like making really good decisions to lead up to this point where I just gifted 40 big blinds that's worth like who knows how much equity to some guy. It's like, yeah, that does really suck. That feeling sucks really bad, but like doing it over and over again, like being able to take those spots is like what separates good professionals from amateur players. Like amateur players are usually not capable of spending 3 days of their precious poker playing time where they don't get to play poker all the time, and then go out in a blaze of glory like that. Like they're not likely to do that. So like having the ability to do that because you are not as emotionally invested in your tournament life and in your stack is like a huge benefit to your game. Like just having the ability to do that, and like also getting the reputation for being able to do that. All of a sudden you're going to get paid a lot more when you actually have hands.
Yeah.
Like look at Selps, like all she had to do was like, what was it, the 5 deuce or something? Like I wonder how much money she's made off of those hands just being televised. Because she's not a psychotic person, you know, like she's played a couple hands that are like definitely psychotic, and they make her look crazier than she is, and I'm sure she had a reasoning behind it, but her reads were just wrong. And all of a sudden she's now playing like a reasonable human, like a reasonable tagged player, and probably making thousands and thousands of dollars off of those hands being televised. So there's nothing bad about going out in some crazy hand. Like Kate, I'm wondering how much money Kate's gonna make off of like some ridiculous hands that have been posted, and like people just like love to hate her sometimes, so they just like repost them everywhere. They make t-shirts out of it, they make fun of her, and I'm like, she plays well like almost all the time. So if these are the hands that people are gonna know her by, like she could end up making a lot of money off of this.
This is one of my very favorite quotes from Nate. He once described, and I believe this player may actually have been from New Jersey, but he once described someone as excessively concerned about being able to justify his play to future time slices of himself.
So bad. That's like, that would be so hurtful if someone said that to me and they're like, yeah, this is basically how I characterize you. I'd probably go cry and then go be a lawyer again. Wow, that's great. I do, like, I fall into that category sometimes. Like, I want to justify something really bad I did, and then it's like 5 minutes later when I'm thinking more clearly, I'm like, I'll go back to the same friend I just talked to and be like, okay, now tell me again why that was terrible. Poker's tough, mentally very tough to, like, be able to put yourself in a place where you can continue to get better. Because we are, like, I don't know, I'm a pretty stubborn person. I'd like to think that I'm, like, making the right decisions. But once I'm in like a clear frame of mind after making a mistake, I'm like very open to listening to it. Just the 1 minute after it happened, I'm like definitely stereotypical girl where I'm just like, no, like I don't want to hear it. Like I don't want to hear that I'm wrong in this argument. Let me cool off first.
What do you do to kind of cope with that, I guess? I don't know, are there strategies for that?
For me, it's just time. Like, after I bust a tournament, like, I just don't want to hear, like, you know, like, there have been times, like, I've been in that national championship 10K a couple times, and, like, I remember it was at Bally's one year, and I just, like, walked down the boardwalk. Like, I took a marginal spot that I'm okay with, but, like, I definitely wanted to talk to other people about, but I just can't right away. Like, I walked on the boardwalk for, like, an hour, and then came back as if I'd never played the tournament, and I could just, like, talk about the hand and be totally emotionally detached from it. But it does, like, take me a few minutes because I think that, like, if you're really playing well, if you're, like, really focused, you're not thinking about what you're going to do once you bust the tournament. There is no after you bust the tournament. You're like, I'm winning this tournament. And you're thinking about every hand. You're watching every player. And it's, like, day 3 of a tournament. Like, you are totally focused and committed to this tournament. So it's always jarring to just bust. Like, you kind of wander out of there being like, well, I didn't plan for this. Like, you know, being realistic is not a good tournament strategy while you're on day 3. You should just be super optimistic, think your butt's going to be in that seat for another 2 days, and just think about the next hand, and that's it.
Well, I think that's part of why busting tournaments, at least like the main event in particular, I feel this way because that can be like a week that you're in that mindset of just like everything you're doing is towards doing better in this tournament, and then
Exactly.
like
About sleeping and eating, everything you're doing is like revolving around, okay, I want to make sure that when I'm sitting and playing that I'm focused and I feel good. So it's like everything in your life is like revolving around that tournament that week.
and then it's like so disorienting that just like in a second that change and you're like my life is no longer about this and it's not going to be for another year.
Yeah. That is a really weird feeling. Like I was fortunate this year to not feel as awful. Like I was so extremely short for like 3 hours before the bubble that I had completely shifted gears to being a little more realistic and being like, okay, like do everything you can to cash this tournament. Like I was like, I know I'm gonna have to get my chips in before the money. I'm not gonna squeak into it. I'm gonna be at risk. Like I didn't have like a big stack and I wasn't thinking like I'm gonna final table this. I'm like, all right, first things first. Like make smart decisions, try to cash the tournament. And then I ended up cashing it, making the next day, and then getting into a 60 big blind flip and just losing the flip. But I was still in that mindset of like feeling fortunate to have cash. I'm like, God, I wish I could bottle that up. Like I wish I could always have that feeling of just being like very much in the moment, not even thinking about the next hand. I was just like, I like left that tournament. I thought I'd be devastated busting the main, and I just was like, okay, well, I had 6 big blinds on the bubble. Can I really be sad? But it's weird. It's like the way we deal with like tournament bust outs. I always think I'm like progressing constantly towards like a better outlook about poker and stuff. And then once in a while, like it's just really strange, like what can happen. It's like it depends like what part of your tournament arc you're on. Like, am I on my upswing or downswing, and whatever else is going on in your life? If you're happy or sad, like I don't know. I have puppy now. Maybe that's why I just walked out of there being like, I'm gonna go see Crouton. Like everything's fine. That could be it. Like maybe just that's the answer. Is just find something consistent in your life that makes you happy, and then like tournaments can't really do too much to you.
Yeah, I do think that's the thing is like you don't want to be too wrapped up in certainly not the results of any particular tournament, but even just like the results of your career. I think if your like self-worth or happiness is too tied up with how poker is going for you, that's
that's miserable in both directions. Because you could just see people get really cocky when they had like a good year. I'm like, dude, you played like one Sunday.
Yeah.
That's what it's like a live poker year. Oh man, if that's the only thing people play is live tournaments for a year, I feel really bad because you better have no emotional swings based on poker then, and that's just so unfair. You can brick for almost a year, or you could also win and think you're like God's gift to poker in a year.
Yeah, I mean, my sort of goal mentally is for like sort of like when I come back from the card room, like I don't want my girlfriend to know from my demeanor like whether or not I had a winning session or like whether it was
Are you really that you're that even you could do that.
Yeah, I don't. So like, I'm way more likely to be affected by like how boring the session was, or like, I mean, it's like there are extremes. Like a really bad session, I might be in like a grumpier mood, or like a really good session, it'll be like a little harder to keep a smile off my face. But like anything within, that's sort of like one of the 3 best sessions and 3 worst sessions I'm likely to have all year. Like there's going to be there'll be some emotion surrounding that, but yeah, for the most part, like I can lose 10,000 big blinds and not no 1,000 big blinds.
Like
10,000 big blinds would be
like,
bad.
I want to get your game.
No, I can lose like 1,000 big blinds and it's not gonna I'm not gonna be like grumpy when I get home.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
And I think that's like I guess really the ideal is what you were saying before about the just like kind of taking every hand for what it is. And I do think that's harder to do in tournaments because you have this idea of like, I just think like when people try to win tournaments, it gets to be a problem because they're just like excessively concerned about not getting eliminated, or they have the idea that like they need to have a stack of a certain size. And there are times like I think I don't think enough about that. Like what came up with the hand, the ace-8 suited hand where you asked, and I really didn't have like a good. I was just like, this is not something I think that much about. But I think most people think too much about it, about the idea of like I want to have a stack of this size, or I want to make sure I still have chips, or like I haven't been dealt a hand in a while. I need to make something happen. That's one that bugs me a lot. The idea that you need to make something happen. And yeah, sort of like you're probably not going to win most of the tournaments that you play. So the idea of that's
having like a goal for how big your stack should be should never. I mean, you can't control what hands are gonna be dealt. You can't really like be like, I would like to have 60 big ones on day 3. But I
hear so many good players talk about that though. Like a lot of people, I'm like, what does this mean to you?
These are players who've done well because I feel like there's a difference. Like You know what I mean? Like it is tricky to like to kind of figure out who you want to model your mindset after and who you want to like, because there'll be people who are like, it's a flash in the pan for a year, and I've like modeled some things in my game over this person because I thought that like tournament success was like way more important than it really is, like for determining if a player is good or not. Like I think that there's a lot of like people who are proven online players who've put in like many tournaments, more than live players ever could, who like I would take into account their advice way more than someone who's just like done well, who's like, I'd like to have 60 big blinds on day 3. You're like, that's great, I'd like to win the tournament. Like, just saying things, they're just words. What I was talking about more with the ace-8 suited hand is like stack utility, and like not all of a sudden like I was in a spot where I no longer really have full equity over a raise, and that's like such a different position to be in than having a 3-bet jamming stack or even like a 3-bet folding stack. I was like kind of in that spot. So I'm like, I went from having options for how to play hands to being like a shove chart, and
no, I get that. I didn't mean to accuse you of doing that. I just mean like, I guess sort of my reaction to sort of like I have a more extreme like play every hand without too much concern for like future hands, that I think that's an important thing to be thinking about, what you said, and I don't do that enough.
Probably because you play cash, you don't have to. You're like, well, if I lose this, I add on.
Right.
You know, you don't really have to like consider it that much, and it's a huge difference in a tournament to just be like, all right, if I take this spot that's like plus chip EV, does it actually increase my EV in this tournament? Because if I lose it 40% of the time or whatever I'm going to lose it, or 50% of the time, like, am I screwing myself for like being able to take advantage of the rest of the players? Like, I think about it a lot more in tournaments that I would like tend to be a big favorite, like the ladies 1K and WSOP. It tends to be more rec players and casual players than almost any tournament I play the rest of the year.
It's so sexist.
So, it's just true. Not because women aren't as good at poker, it's because they satellite a lot of women in. Like, these will be women from home games who might not play a buy-in over $50 or $100 the rest of the year. There's some women who are just getting into poker who are giving it a shot in a tournament where they don't have to worry about guys intimidating them, all that stuff. So it tends to be a really good tournament for me, and I hate taking risk in those tournaments. I hate losing stack utility. I hate the fact that, like, at some point in the tournament, I'm always like, okay, well, now I'm just a shove chart, and like I'm clearly shoving a little wider in those tournaments than math would tell me to. But I think those tournaments are valuable because I've like really considered a lot more in those about like just maintaining my stack. It's so important. If you have a huge advantage over the people you're playing against, then anything gambly you do is just such a huge mistake, and it punishes you so hard.
That's probably a good bit of advice to end on.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
I thought I was going to talk so much more about a couple of those hands, and then I just talked really fast.
I bet a majority of people will enjoy the second half of this more than the first half anyway. I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay, thanks so much for doing this. This is a really good cause, and it's awesome that you're spending so much time doing it.
I appreciate your taking the time, and like I said, if you ever need help with your puppy rescues or whatever, you can feel free to hit me up.
Well, eventually I will. And Crouton actually came and sat on my lap for like the second half of this.
Oh, hi, Crouton.
Oh, all right. Well, I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed that. I certainly enjoyed recording with Jamie and appreciate her taking the time to do so. Once again, if you have not already made a donation as part of the fundraising campaign to the Bay Area Urban Debate League, please do take a second now. Go to baudl.org, click on the donate button, and give whatever you think this video was worth. If you would like to hear more from me, the primary place to do that is at thinkingpoker.net, and you can find links to the podcast and the video sites where I make instructional videos. To hear more from Jamie, I believe twitch.tv/Jamie Kerstetter, and you can see the spelling of it right there, is the best place to get more for her. Thanks for watching, and have fun at the tables.